Okay, we're going to continue to talk about trad protection. And the next thing to know, other than the parts of the cam, is how to place a cam, of course. So I've encountered this nice crack. You know, this could be at the top of a multi-pitch root, and I might want to build an anchor. And so there are a few things that I want to check through. And a good way to start out to remember some of this stuff is to use an acronym. One of the more popular acronyms is ROC STARS. So ROC, S-T-A-R-S. So the first thing I'm going to do is check the rock itself and make sure that the rock is solid. So giving a visual inspection and making sure the rock is attached on all sides, that the rock is unquestionably large, that the amount of load you're going to apply could not possibly move this rock, that the rock isn't sitting on top of an angled surface with small pieces of gravel like little BBs that could make it slide. And another good way to check is give a good hard whack. Okay, and that's rock is good. Okay, so we have rock. The next is S. We're going to look at the size of the crack. So after a number of years of working with cams, I can take a look at the size of this crack, and I can tell that the top part of the crack looks like it's flared out to be about a black diamond 0.75, getting down to 0.5, and then maybe getting down to 0.4 or even into 0.3 at the bottom. So I know roughly the size of the cams that I might want to use. So 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, and 0.75 cam. Okay, and in one of my other videos I'll show a way to rack these on your harness so you can easily locate the different sizes and colors you happen to be looking for. Okay, so identify the size of the crack. Great. Next, we've done rock, we've done S, now we have T, which is type. Type is the type of protection I might want to use. So in this case I'm looking at a fairly parallel-sided crack, which is perfect type of crack for a camming device like this. These cams are also called SLCTs, spring-loaded camming devices, and when they're certified they're simply called friction devices. So they're certified by CE testing. Okay, so SLCD, or friction device, or CAM, which is what they go by for short. Okay, so that's great for a camming device. If there was a constriction in the crack, you know, it looked like this, it was a little bit narrower at the bottom, then that would be a good opportunity to place a nut, which I'll be talking about in a different video. Okay, now we're on to A, which is angle. So there are two considerations for angle. The first consideration for angle is probably the most important, which is the angle of the camming lobes themselves. So we're going to take a look at a large cam first. So this is a number 3 Camelot. Okay. And you can see at the bottom of these lobes there's a 180-degree angle. In other words, it's a straight line across. And we're going to continue to talk about this angle here when we're talking about the angle for placement of the cam. So large cams to medium cams, which I'm defining as the green 0.75 black diamond cam and larger, you want to place from a 90-degree angle from the flat part of that lobe. So there's a 90-degree angle. You can see that if I turn it sideways until it's, there you go, you can see that 90-degree angle there. So you want to place it, the cam lobes are at 90 to tips is an ideal placement. So now you can see the two tips of those cam lobes are touching. Okay, so that's an ideal placement. However, it can still be a relatively strong placement at less than 90 all the way to just about 180, but not as an ideal. So we're going to try to stick with ideal placements when possible. The trouble with a placement where it goes from flat across to parallel here is once you place this cam, especially a cam that's larger and larger in size, like a number 3, number 4, number 5 Camelot, is it can be extremely difficult to remove that cam from the crack. And usually that doesn't amount to a safety problem, because but it could easily result in loss of the cam, which means you won't have it to protect the next pitch, and where it could be critically needed, which could of course be a safety problem, but obviously that's a financial problem. These aren't cheap devices. Okay, so that's what we're talking with angles for larger cams, the 0.75, which is the green cam for Black Diamond and up. And when we're looking at cams that are smaller, let's take a look at a very small cam. This is a 0.3 or 0.3 Black Diamond blue cam. Okay, and this particular cam you want to have at a 45-degree angle with these flat parts of the lobes to tips is the ideal placement. So much smaller margin of error there. And one of the reasons for that is because in the event that there's shifting inside a crack and this cam were to start to open up, it can fail with the smallest of movements and pull out from that crack. And of course, being a smaller cam, the surface area contact with the rock may be smaller depending on the size of the cam lobes as well, compared to a larger cam. So those are all things to think about. The other thing to think about with angle is the actual angle that you're placing it in the rock. If you're a lead climber, the ideal angle of placement for most of your pieces of protection is going to be about a 45-degree angle down. However, this angle is less important than the angle of the cam lobes because these are designed with flexible stems. So in the event that you place the cam like this, 45-degree angle up, and the cam comes under load, that flexible stem can account for the less than ideal placement of angle in the rock. But if you have a choice, it's good to do 45-degree angle up, down. The one piece where it's better to have a slightly different angle is your first piece of protection. First piece of protection that goes in can have what's called a secondary pull on it, which can pull it straight out or even slightly upward. And I'll discuss that in a different video. So keep an eye out for secondary pull or secondary forces in another video. Okay, so we've got rock, we've got size, we have type, we have angle, and now we're on to R, which stands for redundancy. So anytime I'm constructing an anchor, there are a lot of different types of anchor you may construct, depending on whether you're working with snow, working with ice, alpine rock, multi-pitch rock, or top rope climbing, where you still might have a trad anchor. You want to make sure that nothing is relying on a single piece of traditional protection. There are times where you might have one tree as your anchor, one giant boulder as your anchor that will not ever fail. But any time there's something that's made by man, there's always a possibility there could be something wrong with that. So you want to back that up. So multiple pieces of protection in your anchor. Usually the most common anchors that you'll see or see talked about, written about, are 3-piece anchors, 3 cams. Okay, you might have 4-piece anchors. You could have 2-piece in an alpine environment. You could even have 1-piece anchors backed up with a body belay, for example. But anytime each of those, there's at least 2 pieces in the system. When you're lead climbing, you also want to have redundancy. So you don't want any fall to come onto one cam, and then if that cam fails, you're going to hit the ground. So you want to have multiple pieces in your fall protection system. You want to have a redundant fall protection system in case one of those cams happens to fail. Okay, that brings us up to the next S in rock stars, which is it solid? so one thing that many people will do after they place a cam is just give it a quick tug. And I like to sometimes give it a wiggle as well, because if that rope moving through goes in multiple directions, it's going to move the cam, and just see what happens with the cam. Sometimes a cam that moves can wiggle into a position where the cam lobes will open up because you have a convexity inside the rock. So give it a tug and a little wiggle. Make sure it's not going to pop into convexity or wiggle back into a constriction where it becomes more difficult to remove the cam. Okay, so that's rock, size, type, angle, redundancy, and is it solid? Okay, so here we're taking a look at a few placements, and you can see this green cam here. It's just beyond tips, but it's not to 180 degrees. So it's not the ideal placement, but it's plenty strong there, and it's very unlikely to get stuck. We're going to move on down. Right in here, you can see on this purple cam, it's right at tips, so it's just about the ideal placement there, right alongside. And we're going to look at both sides of the lobes. You can see those lobes on that side are a little bit beyond. A little hard to see, but pretty good overall. And then we're going to look down here at this Silver Point 4 cam. Sorry, it's a little blurry here. And you can see as well, it's just barely beyond tips. But for these smaller size cams, we want to make sure that it's definitely under 45 degrees, which this one is, so that's an ideal placement as well. So if I was going to build an anchor, taking all three of these cams and equalizing them could be a good option, provided the rock that they're in was really solid. If I was building this anchor in sandstone, rather than a really hard metamorphic rock or an igneous rock like granite, then having three cams of this size may not be enough. I may want to add another cam or another piece of protection to create a 4-piece anchor, since 2 of those cams are 0.5 and smaller. So take a look at our video on 4-piece anchors if you want to learn about how to build 4-piece anchors and in what situations a 4-piece anchor would be ideal.